Tonight, Russia launches one of its biggest attacks of the war and warns of more systematic strikes to come. Moscow sent a barrage of missiles and drones towards Ukraine's cities, killing more than 20 people and injuring dozens. But Russia is making limited gains on the battlefield and has launched a desperate recruitment drive for drone operators. Coming up, we'll get analysis from Michael Clark. And we'll hear why two seriously injured children from Gaza have accused Prime Minister Keir Starmer of breaking his promise.
It's not fair that there are children there who require treatment, who deserve to have a future, who have instead been left behind to suffer.
Plus, meet the Italian judge who says mafia death threats will not stop her seeking justice. And the so-called Godzilla El Nino, which could bring heat waves, wildfires and flooding across much of the globe. That's all coming up on The World with me, Barbara Serra. Good evening. We have become much too used to images like these. Billowing smoke and orange flames engulfing residential buildings across Ukraine's cities. The aftermath of another attack by more than 600 Russian drones. This is revenge, says the Kremlin. But these pictures, they don't tell the whole story. Because whatever they say in Moscow, Russia is not triumphing on the battlefield. And that's because of Kyiv's very specific strategy to attack supply routes and air defense systems. Now have a look at this checklist. This is how the Russian army is trying to attract drone operators with free medical treatment and tax breaks. They're losing soldiers quicker than they can recruit them. We'll have analysis from Michael Clark and from our Moscow correspondent in just a moment. But first, this report from Alex Rossi.
This is one of the biggest barrages of drones and missiles Russia has launched since the war began. The wail of air raid sirens, then the fires lighting up the night sky over Kiev and other Ukrainian cities. For hours, wave after wave of drones and missiles. Moscow had spent days warning retaliation was coming. Overnight, it arrived.
I went out into the corridor with the phone, and before I understood what happened, everything fell on my head. The glass and the door blew out.
All I could hear in the distance was my wife's scream. I crawled over the fragments. Thank God we're alive.
As emergency workers responded to the attack, the Kremlin said these strikes were revenge for a Ukrainian drone attack, which it claims hit a college dormitory in the Russian-controlled Luhansk region, killing 21 students. For Ukrainians, the warning had brought days of anxiety. President Zelensky renewing his appeal to Western allies.
Потрібні результати по кожній країні, яка може нам допомогти.
We need results from every country that can help us. The intelligence warning regarding Russian strikes remain in effect. Our defenders of the sky are ready 24/7.
The Kremlin wants to demonstrate it can still escalate the conflict despite more than 4 years of war and despite increasingly costly setbacks. It has been striking Ukrainian cities for years, trying to break the will of the population. But these mass assaults are becoming more frequent at a time when there are questions over Ukraine's stocks of interceptors. Ukraine's military, though, is increasingly confident. Its deep and repeated strikes into Russian territory are causing massive economic pain, destroying oil infrastructure. And in terms of negotiations, the diplomacy is at a standstill. But the Kremlin remains defiant, demanding the conflict ends on its terms.
If the
Kyiv regime deliberately commits such inhumane terrorist acts against civilians and children that are beyond the pale of humanity, that is a completely different paradigm. You see that systemic attacks are being carried out on the military infrastructure of the Kyiv regime, on Kyiv, on other cities. This practice will continue.
But the risk in this war with no seeming end, in which Vladimir Putin continues to fail to reach even his limited military objectives, is further dangerous escalation. And this is what that means: a worsening campaign of terror in residential areas against Ukraine's civilian population. Alex Rossi, Sky News.
So what might President Putin's strategy be as he faces battlefield pressure and struggles to recruit soldiers? Here's our security and defense analyst, Michael Clark.
Everybody concentrates on the Iran war, but there's some pretty important things happening in the Ukraine war as well, which we shouldn't lose sight of. Last night, there were a series of big Russian air attacks on the big cities: Kiev, Kharkiv, Poltava, Dnipro, Zaporizhia. More than 600 drones, more than 70-odd missiles, which did a fair bit of damage. And this is obviously the beginning of a Russian air campaign, day and night, to attack the civilian population centres of Ukraine in order to break the spirit of the population. But underneath that, other things are happening which are not so favourable to the Russians. And Sky's data and forensics team, working as well with the Institute for War Reporting, has uncovered a whole series of attacks on the logistic supply routes that the Russians are using. This route in particular, from Russia itself into Crimea, constantly attacked by the Ukrainians to prevent the logistics moving backwards and forwards to Crimea. And this route to the north. These are logistics routes that serve the frontline areas, fighting in Pokrovsk and Kostiantynivka and Shazhev Yar and so on. Attacking these routes is very important because, in effect, what the forensics team have discovered is that the attacks themselves have prevented a lot of the frontline material getting to the front lines themselves. And Russian troops are coming under real pressure because of the attacks in the rear areas of their supply lines. More attacks on Telegram show the targeting of the motorway and vehicles along the Mariupol-Taninrog and Mariupol-Vonavka routes that we looked at. Even more interesting are Ukrainian attacks on the air defence systems in the front line itself. And again, two areas of concentration. One is here, and these are the air defence systems that serve that front line that we were talking about. The reason I think that the Ukrainians are attacking this so obviously is because they're trying to push the Russian Air Force back, because the Russian Air Force is launching glide bombs, and these glide bombs have played havoc with the front lines of the Ukrainians for the last couple of years. If they can push the Russian Air Force back, then the glide bombs have to be released from much further away. They do far less damage. And again, the same for Crimea. Crimea itself is a really important strategic gain for the Russians, which they took. They absorbed it in 2014. If the air defence systems can be destroyed in Crimea, then Crimea is potentially wide open to further Ukrainian attacks. They would love to make Crimea vulnerable for Putin because that would be a big strategic advantage for him. More than that, the Russians are finding that they are having trouble recruiting people. This is a recruiting poster in English, which is around now. It's fairly obvious what it is. They're looking for UAV operators, drone operators to serve in the 18th Combined Arms Army. They're offering lots of money when a contract is completed. But look at this, 220,000 rubles a month in pay. That's about £2,000, which is twice the average wage. It's more than 3 or 4 times the average wage in the poorer oblasts of eastern Russia, in Siberia and so on. And it's not just the money. There's a whole series of advantages: becoming a citizen, having veteran status, having free childcare, free medical treatment and rehabilitation. Lots and lots of different advantages if you sign up as a soldier. Even so, the Russians are recruiting fewer than 1,000 men a day, and they're losing rather more than 1,000 men a day killed and badly injured every day, 1,200, 1,300 on a daily basis. So they're running out of troops, frontline troops, that they can send to the front, which are starved of logistics. It's become very difficult for them. And so back to the air attacks overnight. Of course, the Russians have got the facility to make the lives of ordinary Ukrainians miserable. But the fact is, they're not doing very well on the battlefield. They're losing more men and they're losing more territory than they are gaining. And the Ukrainians have done surprisingly well over the winter and early spring period. The pendulum, I would say, is not swinging back towards Ukraine completely, but the Russian swing of the pendulum seems to have stopped. And we'll see which way the ultimate pendulum goes, the advantages and disadvantages of war, in the summer months to come.
Well, that's how things are going on the battlefield. Let's get the view now from Ivor Bennett in St. Petersburg.
This was one of Russia's biggest attacks of the war so far. According to Ukraine, at least 18 people were killed and more than 100 wounded after hundreds of missiles and dozens of drones bombarded cities across the country. But why has Moscow launched this attack now, and what does it mean? Well, Russia says it's retaliation for what it says was a terrorist attack last month. 21 people were killed in what Moscow claims was a deliberate drone attack on a student dormitory in the Russian-controlled Luhansk region of eastern Ukraine. Kyiv has denied responsibility for it, but Moscow repeatedly vowed revenge, and the scale of this apparent revenge and the rhetoric around it is certainly unusual. I think it tells us two things. One is that Moscow is trying to reclaim the narrative. Ukraine's long-range drone strikes deep inside Russia have put the Kremlin on the back foot and exposed its lack of outright military success. Not only has Russia failed to defeat its enemy abroad, it's now struggling to protect its citizens at home, and that's not a good look for Vladimir Putin. So this feels like an attempt to reassert his authority and tell Russians at home, look, everything's under control. And I think the second thing this tells us is that Vladimir Putin is trying to get the attention of Donald Trump. With the US now totally focused on events in the Middle East, peace talks with Ukraine have stalled. More importantly, billions of dollars of potential American investment into the Russian economy is on hold, and so too is the potential easing of Western sanctions. And that's a problem for Vladimir Putin, with the economy here now faltering. There's a question over how much longer he can afford his invasion. So this feels like an attempt to get the White House to re-engage. It's essentially a warning that if it doesn't re-engage, things could escalate.
To Gaza now, and what was a pledge by the government to evacuate 300 sick and injured children to the UK for free medical treatment. So far, though, only about 50 have been brought over. Today, I met two of them, 12-year-old Mahmoud and Obeida, who is 15. They told me that Prime Minister Keir Starmer has broken a promise.
When
we arrived here, they gave us a really warm welcome, and we felt like we belonged here. First place I went to was the hospital, and I had to leave my siblings who were placed in a hotel. My leg was swollen, so they had to give me a lot of medication in hospital.
And Mahmoud, tell us about what you remember about coming to the UK from Gaza.
During the war, I had a lot of pain in my stomach. I had to walk on my feet 5 kilometers to find the hospital. When I got to the hospital, they told me I have a chronic illness from childhood, and because of the fact that I live in Gaza, I wasn't able to discover this illness beforehand.
And Mahmoud, you had to have an operation, and your mother couldn't be with you for that operation. How difficult was that to go through that without your mother here?
It was a very difficult emotion to deal with. I was crying the whole time. I knew that if my mother and my siblings were next to me, the operation would have been a lot easier to go through, but I couldn't stop myself from crying.
Obeida, you've also spoken about missing your father. Again, it must be very difficult not to have him here.
Yeah, of course it's a difficult situation to be in. I had an operation for my stomach last month, and I felt like I needed him to be there standing next to me to support me, and him not being there made it a lot more difficult. Yeah, and I still have a lot more difficult operations to go through, and I really need my dad to be there supporting, standing next to me. He's supported me since I was a child.
You came to the UK in the autumn, and then you actually met the Prime Minister in December. What did he promise to you when it comes to reunification with your close family?
When we sat with the Prime Minister, he made us promises of reuniting the family. When we informed our family back home in Gaza that we'd met the Prime Minister, they couldn't believe it. They were very happy and looking forward to us being reunited. They thought that that promise would be kept.
Obeida, do you feel the Prime Minister has broken a promise?
Of the 300 families that Keir Starmer promised to bring, he's only brought 50 to the UK. I feel like it's not fair that there are children there who require treatment, who deserve to have a future, who have instead been left behind to suffer.
Keir Starmer broke the promises he made us of bringing these families together, and we strongly campaigned for him to bring children over. The injuries we saw, the cases we saw of the children in Gaza are horrific and they're unexplainable. And that's why we were strongly pushing for more children to be brought here to be treated.
Do you feel that people here in the UK understand what the children of Gaza have gone through, and even the ones that have been taken here to the UK, what they're still going through?
We were born into occupation and we've known occupation our whole lives. You might often see us laughing on the outside, but deep inside there's true pain reflecting this reality. We've been under occupation since 1948, and that's defined our lives.
What do you hope will come out of the visit to Parliament today?
There are so many cases where the cases are just unexplainable, and there's a responsibility to treat those. I wanted to say that on the way here, checking the news, we saw that there was a bombing not too far from our family home. And of course, having limited internet access, we're not able to hear any news from back home. But I want to say to the Prime Minister and to the government is that we're living in a difficult experience, so we'd like your support.
I want to say that the children of Gaza are just as valuable as children elsewhere. The difference is in Gaza, a child could be playing and in one moment his limbs are gone and his life is turned upside down. And that's because the occupation has normalized that, but that shouldn't be normal.
Well, we put what the two boys said, that Keir Starmer had broken his promise to the Foreign Office. A spokesperson told us the situation in Gaza is appalling and options for leaving are extremely limited. This is why we continue to call for Israel to ensure that those who need medical treatment can leave Gaza and get the health care they need. Following the ceasefire, now is the time to scale up aid and ensure much-needed medicines and medical supplies are getting into Gaza. This includes ensuring that the Rafah crossing is able to operate at maximum capacity. Well, you heard there the final words from 15-year-old Obeida. This should not be normal. Activist Ben Cohen, who co-founded Ben & Jerry's ice cream and who's become a prominent critic of Israel's war in Gaza, would agree. He was arrested during a Senate hearing in Washington last year and has accused the U.S. government of cutting health and social funding to fund Israeli weaponry. Have a look.
Members of the audience are reminded disruptions will not be permitted while the committee conducts its business. Capitol Police are asked to remove the individuals from the hearing room.
Well, when I spoke to Ben Cohen at the South by Southwest London event, I began by asking about Hassan Piker. The U.S. political commentator and Israel critic was blocked, along with his uncle, from entering the UK to attend the conference, prompting outrage from free speech advocates.
I think free speech is being curtailed in the U.S. as we speak, and I think the right to protest is being curtailed as we speak. And I think that's not freedom. That's authoritarianism and totalitarianism. I don't know. I thought my understanding of the way things were supposed to be is that you're supposed to do most anything as long as it's not hurting other people. And that's the way I still think it should be. I mean, they're concerned about Hassan Piker coming here because it's going to cause some sort of civil unrest. I mean, you got President Trump inciting a riot, the insurrection on Capitol Hill. I mean, maybe we shouldn't let him come.
Hassan Piker, a very well-known influencer in the United States, a live streamer, his entry to the UK was denied by the British government, and they said that his presence in the UK may not be conducive to the public good. What's your reaction to that?
I was with Hassan Piker. I did an interview on his show, it's hard for me to believe that there's a reason for excluding him from the UK.
What do you make of it, though? And I mean, it seems that the government...
They're saying that he's bad for the public good.
So the exact phrasing from the government is his presence in the UK may not be conducive to the public good.
You know, it's pretty vague. I mean, I got no idea why they excluded him. I mean, it just seems crazy to me, at face value.
He has made some very strong statements against Israel's actions in the West Bank and Gaza. Quite recently, he said that Hamas was the lesser evil over Israel. Do you think, in general, that sometimes governments are a little bit more careful about people that express views against Israel when it comes to platforming them or letting them into the country?
You know, I know that some people have said that criticizing Israel is anti-Semitic. I think that's absurd. I mean, I'm a Jew. I believe Israel has a right to exist, but I'm totally opposed to the slaughter in Gaza. And I'm opposed, and you know, Ben & Jerry's was opposed to the treatment of Palestinians, you know, even before October 7th.
Other influencers have been banned from the UK. The government gives this reason that it's not conducive for the public good. But do you think that particular attention, or that it's harder if you are a vocal critic of Israel? And I say that to someone who has been a vocal critic of the state of Israel for many years.
You know, I think free speech is okay. I believe in free speech, and speaking out against genocide and slaughter, I think, is something that people should be doing.
You've been speaking out on all these issues for many, many years, and you were speaking at this conference. And the title of your talk was When Ice Cream Takes a Stand, the intersection of business, activism, and social responsibility. What is that intersection?
The reality is that business has become the most powerful force in our society, and that business needs to stand up for justice and the common good as opposed to its own narrow self-interest, which ends up making things worse for everybody else.
You've said that companies cannot stay neutral. Expand on that, but also, do you think that many of your buyers, the people who consume Ben & Jerry's, how much do you think they actually care about the values that you say the company holds? Or maybe they're just eating what is pretty good ice cream?
Well, there's a whole range. It definitely, you got to have great ice cream to start with. And a lot of people are buying it just because it's great ice cream. But for a lot of other people, the ice cream actually tastes better because they resonate with the values of Ben & Jerry's.
How would you feel about people that perhaps don't share your values still having Ben & Jerry's?
I think they should have it and enjoy it.
You were speaking here to a lot of young entrepreneurs, and I'm just wondering what your advice to them is, especially the ones that may feel that they also want to champion causes as well as having successful businesses.
I think there was a myth that business could not take stands on social issues and be profitable, or business could not factor in the welfare of the overall society into their actions and still be profitable. But what Ben & Jerry's found was that it's not a trade-off, that just by consciously factoring in concern for social welfare and helping people that are marginalized, we're able to make money and help to solve social problems at the same time.
Ben Cohen, co-founder of Ben & Jerry's, speaking to me a little earlier. This is The World with me, Barbara Serra. Still to come, Donald Trump's apparently expletive-filled phone call with Benjamin Netanyahu. We're going to get the latest from Washington.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be allowed to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood has rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan. I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
Yesterday, we reported on Israel's escalating attacks in southern Lebanon. Well, one of the sites targeted was near the Jabal al-Mel hospital in the city of Tyre. The Lebanese health ministry says 4 people were killed and dozens more were injured. That included medical staff. 4 doctors and 27 nurses were all wounded. And residents who lived nearby rushed to the hospital for shelter.
The humanity we carry will not break or bend. This attack only makes us more steadfast. We assure everyone that the hospital will remain open, committed to its humanitarian and professional duty towards our people.
The baby is 12 days old. They spared no one, neither hospitals nor children nor anything.
God kept him safe. Thank God for everything. It was complete destruction with no mercy whatsoever.
Well, after those strikes, there was a phone call between the leaders in Washington and Tel Aviv, and now we're getting reports about what happened. Let's go live to our U.S. correspondent, David Blevins, who is in Washington for us. David, I've read the reports of this phone call. The language isn't one that we can really repeat here on television, and it's quite rare to hear reports of the U.S. president speaking like that to the Israeli leader.
That's right, Barbara. This began, of course, when Iran said it was no longer prepared to engage with the United States because of Israel's actions in Lebanon. We knew that Donald Trump had subsequently called the Israeli Prime Minister and spoken via the Lebanese government to Hezbollah. But there are now reports that the telephone call between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu became extremely heated. The US president reportedly screaming at the Israeli Prime Minister, what the F are you doing? You're effing crazy. You'd be in prison if it weren't for me. I'm saving your ass. Everybody hates you now. Everybody hates Israel because of this presumably being Israeli strikes on southern Lebanon. Now, this is not our reporting. Those quotes are coming from the website Axios, but given the very different versions of the conversation released afterwards by Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, it's clear that they're certainly not on the same page and that the relationship between them is far from rosy.
Yeah, and all of this, of course, links to the negotiations between the U.S. and Iran. And the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, was questioned by politicians today about those negotiations. There hasn't been a lot of clarity so far. Did we find anything out?
Yeah, busy day for Marco Rubio on the Hill. He's been questioned by a Senate committee and then a House committee. Surprisingly, no one chose to ask him about this reported argument between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. He did say at one stage he believed Iran was trying to stymie diplomacy between Israel and Lebanon so that it could claim credit for any deal that's done in due course. Others, of course, would point out that Iran is inextricably linked to that conflict. because Hezbollah is one of its proxies. The most tetchy exchange came, I think, with the Democratic Senator Chris Wright, who kind of mocked the administration for wanting to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, which wasn't closed until the war began. And then he pressed the Secretary of State on whether they had offered sanctions relief to Iran to get the Strait of Hormuz opened again. Let's just listen to that.
Iran is being sanctioned because they enrich uranium. Iran is being sanctioned because they've highly enriched uranium. Iran is being sanctioned because of their nuclear activities. If they agree to give up those things, there will be sanctions relief associated with their commitment and compliance
but you will not give
with those
sanctions
agreements.
Relief just in exchange for reopening the strait.
No, that's not been discussed. That's not been offered.
Marco Rubio went on to say that while things were still complicated in terms of communications with Tehran because of the very fractured regime, that they did believe the new supreme leader was alive and increasingly engaging. He said there could be a deal today, tomorrow or next week, but also conceded that because of the complexity around the whole nuclear question, it could be months before they have a resolution there.
David Blevins with the latest there from the US. David, thank you. And you're watching The World. Coming up next, we have an exclusive. Meet the Italian judge whose defiance against mafia syndicates has made her their #1 enemy.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking,
Thank you so much.
trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Maria Francesca Mariano is an Italian judge who's put herself at the forefront of the fight against those who want to make Italy one of Europe's narco hubs. And that's made her a top enemy of mafia syndicates who want her dead. In her first ever interview, she spoke to our Europe correspondent Alistair Bunkle about how she defies the threats surrounded by 24-hour security.
We're in a police convoy with Italy's most wanted judge.
Maria Francesca Mariano has taken on the mafia and risked everything.
The mafia here has tried to kill her on a number of occasions, and she's now agreed to give her first ever interview to us.
The mafia in southern Italy is everywhere, and they will kill anybody who gets in the way of their business.
She faces many death threats. She received a severed goat's head through the post.
Drug trafficking makes them a fortune. Italy's not just an entry point for smuggled cocaine. It is a hub for Europe's narco networks.
Our streets are flooded with flows of cocaine of unimaginable purity, with a profit margin of up to 300,000 euros a day.
This is Narcos, Europe Uncovered, the judge who defied the mafia. The Sacra Corona Unita in Puglia is now one of the richest mafia groups in the whole of Italy. They make billions of euros every year from drug smuggling, especially cocaine. The hundreds of miles of rugged coastline here is perfect for bringing in boats laden with the stuff. They sneak into small harbours and bays and then quickly distribute it across Europe. Maria Francesca Mariano is the mafia's enemy number one. She has put many of them in prison, and she now lives with round-the-clock protection.
How is it?
Com'è?
Com'è? È una modalità di vita.
How is it? It's a way of life. Simply that.
Necessaria perché
It's necessary because these soldiers are the cornerstones of my freedom.
sono le assi portanti della mia libertà.
They are my freedom.
Loro sono la mia libertà.
Without them, I couldn't even reach the court.
Non potrei andare forse nemmeno in tribunale.
This land was once fought over by the mafia who wanted to develop it. A politician, Renato Fonte, was shot dead on this spot because she tried to protect it. Despite the risks to her life, this is what motivates Maria today.
È una terra che è stata saccheggiata.
This is a land that has been plundered, vampirized and sold. Even if it costs, this fight is necessary.
This area, this parkland, used to be partly mafia land. There was a real battle for the mafia to try and control it some years ago and develop it, but it's now protected parkland and a symbol of a victory for the judiciary, for the authorities against the mafioso.
The Sacra Corona Unita is one of Italy's most violent and feared mafia syndicates. The group has personally declared war on Maria. She won't talk to us about the specific death threats that she's received, but the severed head of a goat was left on her doorstep with a butcher's knife through it. And she's been sent bullets in the post.
I handled and wrote the ruling in the case of Angelica Pirtoli, a 2-year-old girl who was killed while in her mother's arms. A mafioso grabbed her by her feet and smashed her head against the wall. Nowhere else in the world has a murder of such brutality ever occurred.
Her security never leaves her side. As we're sitting, talking, somebody walks by. The bodyguards immediately close in and reach for their weapons.
La paura è normale che ci sia, no? Fa parte della natura umana.
Fear is normal. It's part of human nature. It's hard to deny that there's fear. But I'm a servant of the state. I must carry on. The option of giving up has never entered my mind. I'm not running away. I'm staying here.
There is now a powerful group of women taking on the traditionally male-dominated mafia in Puglia. Police, journalists, activists, and Maria, the judge.
Do you think the fact that you're a woman is a particular problem for the mafia here that you are trying to fight?
Anche la mafia, non è vero che è una mafia patriarcale.
It's not true that the mafia is a patriarchal system. Now the mafia has many women too. In the Sacra Corona Unita, they're standing alongside their husbands. When their husbands are arrested, they go to meet them in prison and become bearers of orders. From being just unwitting messengers to expressing an opinion and then becoming their husband's alter ego, the step is easy.
L'alter ego del marito o del compagno, il passo è facile.
In 1992, 2 Italian judges were murdered by separate car bombs. Today, a massive poster of them hangs on the side of the court buildings in Lecce as a reminder of the risks that judges today take in pursuing the mafia. And it's hard to say whether they're actually winning the fight. The mafia certainly is now less openly violent than it once was, but their methods have changed and become more low profile. Despite the efforts by Maria and many others, they're still everywhere across this region. Drug smuggling, gun running, extortion, and money laundering has made them wealthy, connected, and powerful. This is a battle for Italian society. Alistair Bunker, Sky News, in Puglia, southern Italy.
Still to come on The World Tonight, from searing drought to destructive downpours, what a so-called Godzilla El Nino could mean for even more extreme weather.
We've come to one of Moscow's Cold War bunkers. It was built as a top-secret command centre. Being here really feels like you're stepping back in time. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent. A show of military might and menace.
Courage, bravery and sacrifice will win the day.
It's a new subject. They'll learn about combat drones and some how to handle a Kalashnikov.
The Kremlin continues to put forward its own version of events, both present and past.
There's no mention of the fact that Russia invaded its neighbour. That's rewriting history, isn't it?
Now we have to read it carefully.
Vladimir Putin put forward his plan for a ceasefire in Ukraine, telling Kiev, pull out of your eastern territories and the war will end. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Vladimir Putin is already the Kremlin's longest-serving leader since Stalin. The question is, what will a fifth Putin term mean for Russia and the world?
Why do you support Vladimir Putin, Mr. Segal?
I can't answer questions that stupid.
I've watched Vladimir Putin attempt to create a new world order.
The St. Petersburg Economic Forum was the backdrop to Vladimir Putin's latest verbal volley that Russia could send missiles to other nations to target the West.
Ambassador, I wonder, shall we have a quick word for Sky News?
Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine?
Swedish media, oh my God, you're not afraid of being here.
American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display.
Russia says Evan Gershkovich was caught red-handed, but has never produced any evidence to back that up. Sky News. Get the full story first.
Liberation Day.
By popular demand,
Whoa.
Here we are.
Donald Trump. It is quite the story. Wherever it goes, on Trump 100, we go with it.
Can you tell us who you're looking for? Unbelievable we've come to this.
Are you overstating the reach and significance of this deal? Not like you said it.
From the UK?
Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
It was 10 feet from him, and all of a sudden the shot's running out.
People impacted.
I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about. Join us wherever you get your podcast.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching.
Good to see you again. How are you?
Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be allowed to warn.
I'm just going to put some body armour on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
A rare weather pattern known as Godzilla El Nino is brewing in the Pacific Ocean, and if forecasts are right, it could trigger extreme weather events around the world. Models show this year's El Nino, a warming of eastern Pacific waters, could be the strongest on record. Our climate reporter, Victoria Seabrook, explains the far-reaching impact.
The world has been warned that El Nino is returning. So what is it, and should we be worried? Well, it's a naturally occurring weather phenomenon that fuels extreme weather and higher temperatures around the world. The last one contributed to the hottest year on record in 2024, but it developed the year before in 23. It drove wildfires in the Amazon and flooding in eastern Africa, which displaced 2 million people. El Nino happens every 2 to 7 years. It's not exactly predictable, and it's caused by a sustained period of warm water in the central and eastern Pacific along the equator here. So this shows temperatures on the ocean surface and how they compare with average, so whether they are cooler or hotter than average. Back in December, they were slightly cooler, you can see from the blue here. And then in January, things just started to shift, and then by April, you can see things getting much warmer than average. The World Meteorological Organization, which is the UN's weather body, has now given it an 80% chance the next El Nino will break out over this summer, maybe in the coming weeks, rising to a 90% chance by November. Each El Nino is different, but this shows how it can bring much wetter conditions to some parts of the world and dry elsewhere. So we've got the drier areas, which is the general trend marked in orange, places like southern Africa, Australia, and in the Amazon region of South America. That's where those wildfires were last time after a prolonged drought. And then you've got wetter conditions in places like East Africa. So that's where we saw those terrible flooding pictures just now in Kenya. Now, El Nino has nothing to do with climate change, but what it does is it layers more heat on top of a world that's already warming. So the red line here shows global average temperatures, and you can see how the trend is upwards, but you can also see how it tends to peak during the years marked in orange. So those are El Nino years here, and that was the last one there. And then it drops off during the cooler La Nina years, marked in blue. That's basically the inverse, cooler weather pattern. But overall, temperatures are climbing, the trend is upwards, and that's because of climate change.
The world must treat it as the urgent climate warning it is. El Nino conditions will pour fuel on the fire of a warming world. Impacts will hit even harder, travel even further, and cross borders with devastating speed.
Now, it's too soon to say how this El Nino will affect the UK. As it is on the other side of the world, there's usually a lag, and impacts are a bit milder. But it is likely to have knock-on impacts, for example, in terms of food prices by disrupting harvests elsewhere. And of course, that can be much more damaging and difficult to deal with for the countries where that's actually happening. And humanitarian groups are warning that slashed aid budgets have left those countries less able to cope. The next El Nino is likely to be strong, some scientists even predicting what they're calling a super event, and it will last into next year with the potential to make 2027 the hottest on record.
Wilfran Mufuma-Okia is head of the World Meteorological Organization's Climate Prediction Services. Sir, thank you for joining us here on the program. How worried are you about this potential Godzilla El Nino?
First of all, thank you very much for having me. The upcoming El Nino, according to our forecast, will have an intensity which can be ranking from at least moderate to strong, because we have a way to classify the El Nino depending on the intensity. But I think the key point is that El Nino, as your documentary indicated, we have a strong probability for it to happen between June and August. So that should be taken as a call for action, because we have the forecast which indicated, yes, El Nino will happen. Now, the way El Nino pan out in different regions is different. So depending on the timing of the year, depending on the vulnerability of the country. So, but what we need to do is to be prepared for El Nino to come.
So you just mentioned it also depends on the country, and in our reporters' report a little earlier, we saw that it's going to affect different parts of the world in different ways. So which areas are you most worried about? Which ones do you think are more vulnerable? And is it an issue of food insecurity, water stress, extreme heat? What do you worry about?
Almost about everything. But one thing to indicate first is that when there is a Nino, typically we have a signature or region prone to consequences of El Nino. It was shown, for example, the Sahel region in Africa, the southern part of Africa. We have the Amazon. That's where we have normally deficit of rainfall. But there are also some other sectors. If you remember, the 2023 El Nino had an impact on the water in the Panama Canal, which has as a consequence to impact on the global trade. So you can have effect on different sectors, going from health to agriculture and even to trade.
A little earlier, we saw the UN Secretary General saying that the world must treat this as an urgent climate warning. What action should countries around the world take? And again, as you've mentioned, obviously different countries will take different measures. But what do you think they should do?
I think our plea will be for the decision maker to take into account the robustness of the information we are providing. The science is clear, so El Nino will establish. Now, it is for every country to see how this information can be integrated in the various mechanisms for crisis management, disaster management. But again, we need to be clear here. The forecast we are providing is not a forecast of disaster. It's a forecast of a phenomenon which is likely to happen with a certainty of 80% chances. So, and again, we are the weather and climate community, so what we want the government to at least acknowledge is the value of the information we are providing to the public. So if the government continues to support the National Med Services, we hope we will have a better way of integrating this information in the policy-making processes. So that's my plea to government.
The last strong El Nino back in 2024 contributed to that year becoming the hottest on record. Do you think we're likely to see that again, another record broken?
Probably, because one of the important effects of El Nino globally is a spike of temperature. And as we know, heat waves are something of concern to most of the people on the planet. If we remember the last El Nino happened in 2023, since then the world has become warmer. So we expect the impact to be more severe. So that's something to worry about.
And just tell us, again, what is it that would qualify this as a Godzilla El Nino? Because we've seen strong ones before. So what's the difference between a very strong one and Godzilla?
Yes, so essentially, just to make to avoid technical wording, we have a way to measure the intensity of El Nino by assessing what we call the sea surface anomaly over the ocean. So basically, we try to have the value of this anomaly in a certain area, and then we have some value. When we have the value between 0.5 and 1 is a weak El Nino, 1 and 1.5 it's a moderate, and above is a strong one. So that's how we classify.
Sir,
now, all our forecasts...
Time, we're going to have to interrupt you there. Wilfred Mufuma Okia from the World Meteorological Organization. Sir, thank you very much. And that is it from me and the team tonight. The World is back tomorrow from 9 p.m. Stay with Sky News now if you can. Gillian is here coming up next with the wrap. Good night.